So if you clicked on this video, then you're obviously curious about how I made this song. And before I start this analysis, it might be helpful if you guys listen to the song first. The link is in the description if you guys want to listen to it. So let's get into it. So for this little build-up right before the song, I just took a synthesizer and then I went into the mixer and gave it a filter, which was the Fruity Limiter. Then I right-clicked on this gain thing and hit create automation clip. But what that basically does, you see this kind of graph where you can drag it around to get louder or softer whenever you want. So if I did this, it would get louder much quicker. So with my original curve, it stays quiet and then gets loud right before this kind of beat starts. Okay, so next is the main part, which is this little 4-measure thing with a piano, drum set, and 808. So for the piano, what I did was I took a key signature, which if you don't know what a key signature is, it's just what notes are in the scale. For a C scale, it would just be. And they're basically just notes that sound good together. When making this piano part, and most of the piano parts in the future, I stuck to the key signature of C minor. So that is this. That creates kind of a sad sound. That's why I picked it. And then what you do when you have a key signature selected, you can just look it up online. Then you can just use notes inside that key signature to make it sound okay. So for this. I didn't go out of the key signature at all. I just stayed inside the key signature of C minor. And that's how you make music sound good without having like random dissonant notes everywhere. And I also edited this with a little thing so that I could lead into the next part, which would also start on C. So this 7 note would lead good into the C, so it sounds like da, da. So that's basically my logic for this part. Then for the drum set, honestly, you don't have to be that specific with the drum set. It's just kind of about making something that sounds good. Now for this, I wanted it to sound, I don't know, cool. So I just made a very busy hi-hat. And this little thing, it sounds like hi-hat rolling. I just made the notes really squished together. So that's the hi-hat. And then for the bass drum, that's really your backbone. When the piano changes notes, the bass drum should usually hit. So for the bass drum, you're going to want to have it as a rule of thumb always on beat 1, which is the start of every measure. So this 1, this 2, this 3. What I did here was basically every time the piano hit a note, I just made the bass drum also hit. So you can listen to that here. Now you can see not every time the piano hit I did the bass drum, but just for the kind of big hits. But for the quicker hits that was like da-na-na, I didn't use the bass drum because the bass drum's more for bigger hits. And then finally for the snare drum, it's kind of like opposite of the bass drum. The snare drum is basically just the upbeat. Like I didn't put it in any special place, just kind of keeping the tempo. The only part where I made an alteration was right here to emphasize the note changing in this measure. Because that da-na-na, it's different from everything else that's happened before. So I'm emphasizing it with the snare drum. Da-na-na. Just kind of brings it out. And that's why I also did the bass drum thing to bring it out. And then also as a transition for the bass drum, I just put it right before the next set of 4. And then finally, pretty easy, the 808s. Really what I did was just copy the piano part so it can give it that bass. I just copied the piano part, but it's much lower. It just gives it that nice bass sound. The only time I didn't copy the piano is if it was fast moving notes, like here. That da-na-na. I didn't make the 808 change, I just waited till the next long note. Da-da. And that's basically the 808 for that first part. So that's the first part done. So now on to the next part, which is this kind of chord piano part. So firstly, for the piano, okay, this is where we start getting into chords. For this piano part, I started with a C minor chord, which, as I said earlier, is the key signature that I mainly thought of the song in. That just sounds like. So it sounds pretty sad. That's the essence of a minor chord. The next thing I did was just move each note down by 1 in the key signature, like G to F, D sharp to D, and C to B flat. So it's still kind of in the key, it is still in the key signature of G, but now we're just moving it down. Same thing with that. So I went from this, and I just took it down too. So for this next part, if you notice, these notes are the exact same as these that played before, except for this, which this, instead of being C sharp, is D. So if you know the C minor key signature, you'll know that this is not part of the key signature. And if I just kept it in the key signature, it would sound like this. But the reason I moved this down is because moving this down changes it from a major to a minor chord. So listen to this. This is major. And then I moved it down one to sound sad. But I just did that to make the chord sound more sad, like it's going down. And for this next part, see, I made it minor there, or I made it major there to bring it back to happy. And then this next part is kind of just to make it uplifting, just going up. Here what I did is I just brought all the notes up by one to make it go back to the happy. This is a major chord. For this, that's not in the key signature. I changed this note because I wanted to make this chord right here, this second one, from minor to major to make it sound happier. So that's that. So for the drums for this part, I kind of just chilled out on the hi-hat. So it's just kind of there to keep the tempo going, but it's not like going super crazy. For this little part, just to emphasize the da-na-na. Every time the piano hits a note, just bass drum and snare drum. You get the idea. And then the 808, it just followed the bass note of this piano. So like if this bass note was C, I just put that on C, and that's just how I did the 808. For the second half of this piano part, starting here, for this here, I used an E major 7th chord. If you know what that is, good for you, but if you don't, it's okay. It's just a chord. I wanted to make this part more uplifting than this part, because this is just chords. For this part, I added a little bit more. Just some basic piano stuff going on up here. Nothing crazy, just staying in the key signature and going up. And when I say key signature, I mean in the key signature of this chord, because the bottom note is E. I'm assuming everything is in the key signature of E major. So then I make notes based off of that. Then I did the same thing here. This is a D minor. But instead of the top note being D flat, I made it B, which is the 7th note in the scale. So for this again, I just made a chord, then added the 7th note, which is for this is the D minor 7th. Same thing I did here, except just different chord. And same logic here, just go up the scale. Then here, I believe I did a B flat minor chord originally, but I moved this note just to make it a little, just offset the sadness a little bit. Then again, go up the scale. That's all I did there. And for this final part, that chord sounds weird and different. It's because instead of it being a B major, I made it into what I believe is called a B major augmented, which is where you take this 5th note and raise it up by 1/2 step. So that would be, then instead of getting that really happy feeling, you get something that sounds kind of like emotional. It kind of just puts off that happiness a little bit. So it's still happy, but you're like, what's going on here? That little thing is just me making a decent transition back into the main loop, which is going to play after this. And the reason I did B to E is because B to E is a major 5th, which that's usually a pretty powerful note combination to go with. Because if you listen here, it just sounds powerful. So that's why I put that there. And everything's just an octave. So whatever's happening down here, also up here. And then for the drum set part, because I'm making the piano a little more active with its parts, adding more notes, the hi-hat can also get more active. And with the hi-hat, it's always a good idea to line it up with the piano notes. So, da, na, na. And after lining it up with the notes, you can just add some random things in here. This pattern's the same all 3 times. It's just repeating since the piano part's repeating. And then for this last part, I just really wanted to emphasize the big note changes that were happening. So I did this bling. And without the hi-hat, you just kind of lose some of that. So you want to make sure you emphasize stuff with the hi-hat. With the bass drum and snare drum, again, the drum set is usually for emphasis of what's going on melodically. Now here I'm just following the rule of bass drum on every downbeat of every measure. So 5, 6, 7. So the big note changes, I add more bass drum. Boom, boom, boom. This last bass drum is just for a transition to the next part. And with the snare drum, I just had it going on every beat 4, just to make it feel like we're kind of getting back into the groove of the song, but not exactly. So that's why it's only on beat 4 and not on beat 2 and 4. But then when we get back to here, right before we finish this section, I add it back onto 2 in addition to the 4, so that it sounds like we're getting the song moving again. And then finally, before we move on, the 808, same thing as last time, just bottom bass note on the piano, copy it onto the 808. And to emphasize these little top notes, I also added the bass to it. So again, just emphasizing important notes. I just did that all the way down. And then that brings us to this little loop. So this plays again, 4 measures of that. And then we get into this little piano section. So for this, I did not include any 808. By taking this out, I'm emphasizing the only thing that is playing, which is the piano. And then we have the drums to support that. So we'll go into the piano first. Now, as you can see, there's a lot more stuff going on here. I still did the same chord thing. Again, here, if you see, I start on C minor. That last note is a 7th. I did that a lot in this song. Just a major chord or a minor chord with a 7th. And then for this top part, it's kind of just a lot of moving around the scale. But don't be afraid to break notes in the key signature. This isn't in it. This isn't in it. That's not in the key signature. It makes it sound kind of more, just kind of off-putting. And then the next chord, I just moved it down. If you notice, for this part, I just did a straight B flat minor chord, like no alterations, just literally B flat minor. The reason I did that is because if I moved this down, all of this down 1, I would get this. That sounds happy. I don't want to break the mood with that like straight, really happy chord. So I made that minor just to fit the mood. And for this top part, again, just kind of moving around the scale, some out of key notes like this. And yes, it's out of the key signature, but it sounds good. And if you just play around with notes and see what sounds good, then it'll be fine. And you'll also notice the use of a lot of chromatic notes. So that means like right next to each other. Chromatic, chromatic, chromatic. Chromatic notes just add, I don't know what chromatic notes add, but they sound good. And then for this chord down here, that's just a straight G flat major chord, just to bring it back from the really sad we just had. And I was kind of slowing it down, just adding some slow ascending notes. And then for this, it's pretty similar notes to the last one, except instead of it being just a straight major chord, I changed the 2 middle notes so it sounds not as happy, just to bring the mood back to a little more sad. And then this next chord, I just brought these 2 notes down even more just to make it sound like it's going downhill, just to bring it down from here to the final chord that we end on to make it sound more satisfying. And we end on a C minor chord, again, what we started in. Okay, and then these notes up here. Again, you see I use a lot of chromatic notes. What I typically do, I group my chromatic notes in groups of 2 a lot. So I'll do 2 chromatics, then I won't do a chromatic the next note, but then I'll do a chromatic the note after that. You see what I'm trying to say. And also I just ended pretty close to the note C, just on D, so it sounds satisfying to go from da, da. And here, adding a bottom bass note on C and a top one. And that's that piano part. And then the drum set to go with that. This is kind of supposed to be like the cool piano part. So the drum set also has to be cool to match that. So first with the hi-hat, I just added a lot more notes just to make it sound like it's very in your face and constant. So for this first little hi-hat part, it sounds kind of off, but it's kind of off on purpose to make it sound like it's just kind of going crazy, like especially this last part. Then you can hear just this nice little trill These little trills just sound nice, so I just put them in. Now, to me, this part is super satisfying. When triplets especially match up with the notes, it just sounds so satisfying. I don't know why, but I just think triplets that match with whatever melodic instrument is going just sounds so nice. So, I don't know, I like that so much. And the next part. This hi-hat part is more calm than the other two, because the piano is also more calm. So just kind of taking away notes, making it more straight and even. Same with this last part. I mean, less is almost more. Taking away hi-hat notes is almost more dramatic than just adding a ton of crazy things. So that's why I did that right before the end of that piano part. And then for the bass drum, again, just emphasizing the big hits. Boom, boom. Boom, boom. 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 Boom, boom. So just kind of matching the piano on the big notes. The bass drum is there to match the big notes on the piano, make it pop more. The snare drum is there, not for any specific reason, but it's just kind of like driving the tempo. But I also kind of put the snare drum there. You'll notice first it's on the second beat, the next measure it's on the third beat, the third measure it's on the fourth beat, then finally here it stays on the fourth beat. So I just kind of made it move around to be a little more unpredictable, I guess. And also this note right here goes really well with the triplet part. I don't know why, it just sounds nice. Then we got this. Yeah, the snare drum's not that complicated. Usually it's always going to be on beat. And then we get into this next controversial part. So yeah, okay. When I made this part, I wanted it to sound like a really cool piano, or just a really cool like part of the song that was like a cool solo that I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds so cool. I don't think it's exactly that, but I really wanted to find a way to incorporate it, so I made it work. So let's go into that solo part. Oh, I forgot to go over all the sounds and how okay, but it's not that important. But for this, I just added a ton of effects. Yeah, I can show you real quick. I just put narrow on max, squash on max, phaser on max, and space on max, and the reverb is kind of, it's there. So just a lot of effects, because it's the exact same piano sound as all the other ones that I've played. I just added effects to make it different. Okay, but now for the actual notes. And again, I'm imagining all of this in C minor, so keep that in mind. If you know what C minor is. I wanted this first part to be in your face and fast. Most of it is in the key signature of C minor, just moving around. Just kind of plopping notes around, making sure it sounds all right. And for this part is just a ton of chromatic stuff. If you take away all the fluff, this is just me going down chromatically for like 2 measures straight. And that would be pretty boring by itself. So instead of just doing that, as I went on, I just added more notes so you can listen. So when I started, I just had it be 2 notes. The top note, and it's major fifth, which again, major fifths, they sound powerful, so that's why I put it here. Then after that, here I just added an octave of this, so then it went. Right before we got to the bottom C, I added another note, an octave of the fifth we had, so now it's 4 notes. And then ending on the C because that's the key signature, so everything's based off of that. And then here, I just did the top 2 because doing all 4 at a time that fast wouldn't sound that good. It would just be a little too much. And plus, then there's no room to build when you go here. So that's why I took it away. Then here I have more chromatic stuff, just chromatic, 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 then up chromatic, chromatic, chromatic. And then here I'm just emphasizing every 3 notes, so it's like da-na-na, da-na-na, which is why I have these little middle, again, they're fifths, major fifth. After the da-na-na, da-na-na, I just do octaves, just going, which this little thing, that's just a C minor arpeggio. So it's just going, da-na-na. And then right before we finish this solo section, I just plop a ton of notes down. Okay, all of these notes are chromatic, except for the last 2. I go from F to D, so we can end on that satisfying C note. And then as we went down, I just added more notes. So here it's single, and after 4 of those, I put the major fifth in. I use major fifths a lot here. And then for the very last 4 notes, I did the top note, major fifth, and then an octave of the top note. So it just got more intense as it went down. And then that leads us back into our original loop. And then this is the last time the loop plays. Then I just end on a nice C major chord. And just real quick, if you can see what it looks like, C major. So that's like the happiest it can get. C major chord. And that's just to make the song sound resolved. Because after all of this sadness and minor, like, I'm so sad. Then we end on this happy little thing. And it's just so satisfying. And that's the explanation of my entire song. I know the song isn't like crazy good or anything. I just thought I'd offer another perspective on what goes through another music producer's head when they're making a song. And by the way, I'm not a professional music producer. This is literally my second song. But if you want to see me make my first song, the video is right there. And you can go and watch it right now. Thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.